Hey guys, welcome back. Tonight, we're not just traveling into ancient Egypt, we're slipping into the silence behind its most haunting mystery. Because somewhere between the rise of a new sun god and the fall of a forgotten empire, one queen walked into the light of Aten and then vanished without a trace. Her name was Nefertiti, the woman whose beauty shaped an era, whose power reshaped a kingdom, and whose disappearance has obsessed historians for more than 3,000 years. Tonight, we're following her footsteps into the heart of Amarna, the city built for a revolution, lit by a sun no one worships anymore. We'll wander through broken palaces, decipher erased names, explore forbidden chambers, and drift through the quiet corners of history where her shadow still lingers. This isn't just a story about a queen, it's a story about a crown that vanished, a legacy that refused to die, and a mystery that still breathes beneath the desert sands, waiting for someone quiet enough, gentle enough to listen. So before you get comfortable, take a gentle moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if these deep sleep history stories help you find peace, sleep better, or simply reflect on our shared journey through time. Now, close your eyes, let the desert wind soften your thoughts, and follow me into the last light of the vanished queen. Imagine a land where the desert meets the sky in a straight line, where every sunrise is not just a beginning, but a proclamation from the gods. Tonight, as you settle into the quiet rhythm of your breath, we return to Egypt during the twilight years of the 18th dynasty, an age trembling on the edge of transformation. The kingdom had known glory for centuries, ruled by pharaohs whose names echoed like stone pillars along the Nile. But beneath the shimmering heat and golden sands, something was shifting, something that would change the soul of Egypt forever. In the city of Thebes, priests of the old gods still chanted their hymns to Amun, their voices rising inside sacred halls. Yet far above them, in a palace filled with sunlit courtyards and restless ambition, a young king looked toward the horizon and wondered if the world needed a new kind of light. His name was Akhenaten, a pharaoh unlike any who had come before him. And beside him stood a woman whose presence would soon eclipse the old traditions. Nefertiti, the great royal wife, a queen whose beauty and power would carve a place for her in the eternal stone of history. But before Nefertiti stepped into the blinding glow of Aten, Egypt was a world of balance and familiar ritual. The Nile flooded each year, pouring life back into the fields. Farmers harvested grain, while scribes carved the victories of kings into limestone. Temples to Amun, Mut, and Khonsu stretched toward the sky, each brick placed with prayers. The air smelled of incense, lotus oil, and warm earth. Everything felt predictable, eternal. And yet, behind this sense of permanence, currents of change were already flowing. Akhenaten believed that the gods of old had grown distant, their temples weighed down by centuries of privilege and power. He had visions of a single radiant force, the Aten, the disk of the sun that embraced all life with its rays. Historians still debate whether Akhenaten's devotion was religious passion, political strategy, or the dream of a visionary king who wanted to reshape the world. But in the soft glow of evening, when the sun dipped low over the Nile, he shared these ideas with the one person who understood him completely, Nefertiti. She was not a passive queen sitting in the shadow of her husband. In the earliest records, her image appears not behind him, but beside him, her chin raised, her shoulders squared, her crown towering like a statement of destiny. Nefertiti carried herself as though she knew that Egypt was on the brink of something extraordinary, something terrifying, something entirely new. And she was ready. As Akhenaten's belief in Aten deepened, the heart of Egypt began to tremble. Imagine the hush that must have fallen across the palaces, the whispered conversations of advisors, the tight expressions of the priests whose power depended on the old gods. Imagine the quiet weight that settled on Nefertiti's shoulders as she realized she wasn't merely accompanying a king, she was helping usher in a new world. It was during this time that Akhenaten and Nefertiti made a decision that would shock the empire. They would abandon Thebes. They would leave behind its temples, its centuries of devotion, and its priesthood. And they would build a new city in the desert, a place untouched by tradition, a place where Aten could shine without obstruction. That city would be called Akhet Aten, the horizon of the Aten, known today as Amarna. For now, imagine them traveling north along the Nile, moving past cliffs that glowed copper at sunset, past fishermen drawing nets from the river, past villages where children watched the royal barges drift by like floating palaces. All of Egypt wondered what the king and queen were planning, but only two people knew that they were stepping into history. And as the Nile carried them toward the bare desert plains that would become their new home, Nefertiti felt the warmth of the sun gathering on her skin, not the soft warmth of morning, but the fierce, commanding radiance of a new god rising. That was the moment she realized the truth. She was not meant to stand behind the king. She was meant to stand in the light with him. And from this light, her story, both glorious and tragic, would begin. The sun had always been Egypt's silent ruler, but during the early reign of Akhenaten and Nefertiti, it became something more. A presence that followed every step they took, a force they believed was watching, guiding, almost whispering through the desert wind. As the royal barges carried them northward, the river stretched before them like a shimmering ribbon, winding through a landscape that had shaped countless dynasties. Yet this journey was not simply a relocation. It was the slow unfolding of a revolution, one that would challenge the very heartbeat of Egypt. The Nile, timeless and patient, seemed to sense what was coming. Its waters flowed gently, brushing the wooden hulls of the royal boats, carrying with them the whispers of fishermen, farmers, and travelers who had no idea they were living at the dawn of a seismic shift. High above the deck, Nefertiti stood beneath a canopy of linen that billowed softly with the breeze. The air smelled of lotus flowers and warm reeds. She watched the horizon with an expression that blended serenity with anticipation. There was something extraordinary in the way she carried herself, a calm assurance, a quiet gravity, as if she were already aware of the weight history would place upon her shoulders. Nefertiti's influence, even in these early years, was unmistakable. In artwork carved by skilled artisans, she was depicted not merely as a companion to the king, but as a pillar of the new spiritual vision. Her silhouette was unmistakable, the tall blue crown rising high like a flame, her posture upright, elegant, commanding. For many Egyptians, she appeared almost divine, an embodiment of the harmony and beauty that Aten's light was said to inspire. In the evenings, when the sun dipped below the cliffs, Akhenaten would stand beside her. Together, they watched the fading rays scatter across the river, painting everything in colors of gold and rose. These quiet moments were perhaps the closest they came to stillness during this turbulent chapter of their lives. The king often spoke of his dreams, visions of a world where the light of Aten swept away the shadows of corruption, where devotion came not from fear, but from gratitude for the sun's life-giving warmth. Many modern historians interpret Akhenaten as a radical reformer, someone who saw himself as a disruptor of ancient systems. Others call him a dreamer, lost in a spiritual ideal that could never survive the weight of reality. But whatever the truth, one thing is certain: Nefertiti believed in him. She understood the risks, the backlash from powerful priests, and the uncertainty that awaited them. Yet she stood beside him with unwavering conviction. This bond between them, part partnership, part shared destiny, would shape the course of history. As they traveled farther from Thebes, the landscape began to change. The lush fields gave way to stretches of pale desert. The river curved away from them, and the distant mountains rose like silent guardians. It was here, on a desolate plain untouched by the footprints of men, that Akhenaten declared his vision. He pointed toward the open wilderness and said, "This shall be the horizon of Aten." Nefertiti felt the words settle into her spirit. She closed her eyes and imagined the future city, wide avenues bathed in sunlight, temples open to the sky, families gathering at dawn to greet the rising disk. It was a city unlike any Egypt had ever seen, a city where traditions would be rewritten, where art would soften into curves and warm expressions, where the Pharaoh and his queen would be depicted not as distant gods, but as living, breathing humans embraced by sunlight. But for all its beauty, the decision to build Amarna was also an act of defiance. By placing their new capital far from Thebes, Akhenaten was severing centuries of power held by the priesthood of Amun. Nefertiti understood the magnitude of this step. She sensed the tremor it sent through the old institutions like a quiet thunder rolling beneath the earth. And yet, she did not shrink from it. Instead, she inhaled the dry desert air and felt a strange sense of freedom in the emptiness before her. As night approached, the sky shifted from gold to violet. Stars emerged one by one, shimmering over the quiet dunes. Nefertiti rested her hands on the railing of the barge, watching the soft glow of lanterns flicker on the water. She knew she would need strength, not the strength of warriors, but the steady, enduring strength of someone willing to face the unknown without fear. For she was no longer just a queen. She was becoming the face of a new world, and the desert,
silent and patient, waited to witness her rise.
As dawn approached on the final leg of their journey, the world seemed to hold its breath. The desert ahead was still a blank canvas, untouched by temples, untouched by memories, untouched even by the footprints of wandering herds. It was a silence so complete that Nefertiti could hear her own thoughts echoing beneath the steady beat of her heart. The royal barge drifted quietly, its oars dipping into the river with smooth, rhythmic strokes. It was in this moment, when the horizon glowed with the first light of autumn, that Nefertiti sensed a profound shift. The air around her seemed to hum with anticipation, as though the god her husband worshipped was waiting to see whether the world would accept this new beginning. Behind her, the attendants moved slowly, careful not to disturb the fragile peace of dawn. Musicians tuned their harps softly, their fingers brushing the strings in gentle whispers. Priests murmured hymns written for autumn, their voices blending with the rustle of linen robes. Even the guards, hardened by years of service, softened their steps as if the very sand required reverence. Nefertiti stepped forward, lifting her gaze toward the widening glow. The rising sun painted her skin with the first rays of gold. In that instant, she did not feel like a queen fleeing an old capital or wandering into exile. She felt like someone chosen to be seen, honored, illuminated. Amarna did not exist yet, but the promise of it lived in the light. This was the land that would bear witness to her rise, her power, and eventually her disappearance into legend. Akhenaten joined her at the front of the barge, his face long and graceful in the style immortalized by Amarna art, warmed under the morning rays. He spoke softly, not as a king commanding an empire, but as a man sharing a vision. "Here," he said, "here the light touches the earth without shadow." Nefertiti understood what he meant. In Thebes, the towering temples cast long darkness across the courtyards. But in this open desert, the sun traced no sharp edges. Everything glowed evenly, freely, fully. It was the perfect stage for a religion built not on mystery, but on clarity. The symbolism was powerful, and Nefertiti felt it wrap around her like a veil of fire. She imagined the city rising out of the dust, homes arranged in harmony with the sunrise, workshops alive with artisans carving soft, rounded forms, children laughing as they learned to greet Aten each morning. She imagined the great temple, no roof, no shadows, only pillars opening to the sky, a place where sunlight itself was the blessing. This vision carried her deeper into the stillness of her own thoughts. For the first time, she wondered what role she would play in this unfolding story. Would she be merely the great royal wife, the beloved partner of a revolutionary king? Or would she become something more, an embodiment of the new light, a queen who would stand not behind her husband, but beside him as an equal? Her heart answered quietly. She knew. The world might not be ready. The priests might resist. The nobles might whisper. But she was ready. She knew in her bones that leadership could be gentle and fierce at the same time, that a queen could guide not by force, but by presence. As the barge approached the sandy banks of the chosen site, Nefertiti felt the shift in the air again. The desert breeze carried a faint scent of stone waiting to be shaped, of earth waiting to be claimed, of destiny waiting to be written. Workers leapt into the shallows, securing ropes and preparing the landing ramp. Architects, scribes, and foremen stood ready to survey the land. But before anyone moved, before even the king set foot on the sand, Nefertiti closed her eyes. She breathed in deeply, letting the stillness settle inside her. And in that moment of quiet, she felt as though Aten's rays were not simply shining on her, but through her. The warmth seeped into her chest, into her pulse, into the soft determination inside her spirit. This was the moment she crossed the threshold from a queen of the old world to the dawn of something new. When she finally stepped onto the sand, the desert did not greet her as a stranger. It welcomed her like a witness. Her footsteps left the first marks of what would become Amarna, a city born from devotion, rebellion, vision, and light. And as she walked forward, the sun climbed higher, casting no shadows, only illumination. In that brightness, Nefertiti felt herself awaken to her purpose. She was not merely following history, she was becoming it.
There is a moment in history when Nefertiti stepped out of the soft glow of her queenly image and into something far more powerful. Something that blurred the line between queen and king. Tonight, as you settle deeper into the stillness around you, we drift into the years when Nefertiti became more than the great royal wife. She became the second half of a throne shared between two rulers, and perhaps one day, the sole figure seated upon it. After the founding of Amarna, the world around Nefertiti shifted. The desert city began rising like a mirage turning into stone. Walls were carved, courtyards laid out, pillars lifted toward the open sky, and in every carving, every scene of worship, every royal procession, every moment immortalized in limestone, Nefertiti appeared, not behind Akhenaten, but beside him. To the eyes of modern archaeologists, these images whisper a truth ancient scribes never wrote outright. Nefertiti was not simply a consort, she was a ruler in her own right, a partner in a co-regency that defied centuries of tradition. When we look at the surviving reliefs, we see details that reveal her rising authority. She wears the blue Khat crown, usually reserved for pharaohs. She raises the ceremonial club in depictions of smiting enemies, a gesture once associated only with kings. In some scenes, she sits alone beneath the rays of Aten, receiving the Ankh, the breath of life, directly from the god's hands. It's as if Aten himself recognized her not as queen, but as sovereign. Scholars today debate how far her power extended. Some believe she and Akhenaten shared the throne fully, ruling as co-pharaohs. Others suggest she exercised authority during Akhenaten's absence or illness. What the evidence makes clear, however, is this: Nefertiti moved through the palace not as a shadow, but as a force. Her voice mattered, her presence commanded, and her image in art, ritual, and politics became inseparable from Aten's divine radiance. But why Nefertiti? Why did Akhenaten choose her, and not a son, a brother, or a noble official to stand at his side in such an unprecedented role? Perhaps the answer lies in the tangle of devotion and ambition that bound them. The two were profoundly connected, aligned in belief, purpose, and temperament. Akhenaten was a visionary, but vision alone can be fragile. It can collapse beneath the weight of doubt. Nefertiti, however, was the grounding force, the steady flame beside the sun. Her charisma softened the extremity of Atenism. Her beauty, celebrated then and now, made the new religion seem less foreign, less severe. People might resist a new god, but they found it much harder to resist a queen whose very face was becoming iconic. And so, in the city of Amarna, Nefertiti's presence grew brighter. She participated in rituals previously reserved for kings. She held the hands of her daughters during ceremonies to Aten, shaping the royal family into a living emblem of divine connection. She appeared in art with the same elongated features as her husband, an intentional choice, historians believe, meant to portray unity, equality, and shared purpose. The world of Amarna was a world made in two halves: Akhenaten, the dreamer, and Nefertiti, the embodiment of that dream. It is even possible that she took on an additional name, Neferneferu Aten, a throne name, perhaps even a royal name. Some fragments hint that she did more than share power. She may have stepped into the role of Pharaoh herself, a female king in a line where such a thing was rare but not impossible. But tonight's story is not about conclusions. It is about the atmosphere of a world where power shifted quietly beneath warm desert winds. In those years, Nefertiti walked the line between queen and king with such grace that the boundary itself seemed to dissolve. And yet, as her influence grew, so did the murmurs in the shadows, whispers of danger, doubt, and the uneasy weight of the old gods watching from forgotten temples. And that is where our path will lead next.
In the years after Amarna rose from the dust, a quiet yet undeniable transformation settled across the royal palace. It was not sudden, not loud, not even formally announced in any decree or inscription. Instead, it unfolded the way dawn replaces darkness, slowly, inevitably, so gently that one only realizes the change after it has fully arrived. Nefertiti's presence had grown into something larger than ceremonial authority. It had become the axis around which the new world of Aten turned. Inside the palace halls, where sunlight spilled through open windows and painted the floors with warm patterns of gold, officials approached Nefertiti with the same reverence they once reserved solely for kings. She listened carefully, her manner calm, her responses measured, her gestures graceful yet decisive. There was power in her stillness, influence in her silence, and a kind of quiet command that even seasoned administrators felt compelled to obey. This was no ordinary queen. In the carved scenes along the temple walls, her figure appeared almost equal in size to Akhenaten, an artistic choice loaded with meaning. In Egyptian art, size was hierarchy. To stand the same height as a pharaoh meant one was no longer simply adored, but obeyed. And there were the inscriptions, fragmented, faint, incomplete, yet gripping the imaginations of scholars centuries later. Among them were epithets linked to a mysterious name, Neferu Aten, a name that carried weight, a throne name, a royal identity. Some speculated this was a new pharaoh altogether. Others dared to whisper that it was Nefertiti herself, elevated, crowned, transformed. Within the flowing script of hieroglyphs were hints effective for her husband, beloved of Aten, ruler of all. And though the truth remains lost in the unfinished corners of history, the possibility remains alive like a lantern glowing gently in the shadows. While Akhenaten pursued his spiritual vision, Nefertiti became the embodiment of Aten's living grace. During rituals in the Great Temple, she lifted offerings with arms that glowed beneath the sun's rays, her daughters by her side, their small hands holding lotus flowers or sistrums that chimed softly in the wind. The sound of these rituals was unlike those in Thebes. There was no deep echo of drums, no thick incense that clouded the air. Aten's worship was open, sunlit, uncloaked, every gesture performed under the direct gaze of the sky. Nefertiti moved through these rituals not with the mechanical precision of tradition, but with the fluidity of someone deeply aligned with the spiritual language of the moment. In these ceremonies, she was more than queen. She was the human mirror of a god's radiance. Artists of the Amarna period captured this feeling with shapes that seemed warm, fluid, intimate. Gone were the rigid postures of earlier dynasties. In their place were scenes of affection, Nefertiti holding her daughters, Nefertiti touching Akhenaten's hand, Nefertiti leaning toward Aten's light with an expression almost contemplative. This shift in artistic style was not merely aesthetic, it was political, it was ideological. Through these images, the royal family became the living symbol of Aten's presence. And at the center of this symbol was Nefertiti. Ministers began referring to her in official records with titles that edged closer and closer to kingship. She granted audiences. She settled disputes. She appeared in diplomatic exchanges, sometimes greeting foreign envoys when Akhenaten was indisposed or absent. Her steady hand kept the administration functioning while the king delved deeper into his spiritual revolution. Those who served in the palace spoke quietly among themselves. They said that when Nefertiti entered a room, the atmosphere shifted, lighter, calmer, yet charged with a sense of direction. She stood with the bearing of someone always aware of the horizon ahead. Someone who understood that decisions carved today would become the stone foundations of tomorrow. And yet, through all this rising influence, there was an undercurrent, an awareness that power is never granted without cost. In the distant temples of the old gods, the priests whispered of imbalance. In the noble households of Thebes, families murmured questions. In the military ranks, some wondered what it meant for a woman to wield authority equal to a king. Those murmurs had not yet grown into threats, but the wind carried them like seeds blown into the desert. Tiny now, easily ignored, until the day they would take root.
As the city of Amarna settled into its rhythm, something else began to shift beneath its sunlit surface. Something quieter than rebellion, softer than resentment, but persistent enough to echo through the corridors of power. It began as murmurs, carried on the warm afternoon breeze. Then it drifted into private conversations among officials, into cautious glances exchanged during rituals, and finally into the unspoken awareness that lingered even as Aten's rays washed over the city. This subtle unrest grew not because Nefertiti failed in her role, but because she succeeded too well. In the eyes of the people of Amarna, she was no longer simply the great royal wife. She was the cohort of the kingdom,
a figure whose strength radiated almost as strongly as the sun disk itself. Some scribes recorded that when both rulers appeared in public, crowds instinctively looked first to Nefertiti, not out of defiance, but because her presence carried a warmth, a clarity, and a grace that felt easy to approach. She was the human face of the new age, and that, for some, was precisely the problem. The priests of Amun, though exiled in influence, were not erased in spirit. Far away in Thebes, behind the thick stone walls of temples no longer receiving royal offerings, they whispered about imbalance. They wondered aloud what happened to a world where a woman wielded power not granted by tradition, but carved out through charisma, intelligence, and the unwavering trust of a king. In diplomatic circles, too, questions arose. Foreign envoys who traveled to Amarna returned to their homelands, describing a kingdom illuminated by sunlight, yet governed in part by a queen whose authority nearly eclipsed that of her husband. Some were impressed, others were cautious, a few were alarmed. And deep within the palace, officials loyal to the old ways kept their observations quiet, storing them like sealed jars waiting for a more favorable season to open. Still, Nefertiti continued her work with calm determination. Each morning she rose before the sun, stepping into the gentle air of dawn as autumn's first rays silvered the desert sands. She walked through the courts where artisans were carving scenes of the royal family. She listened to petitions from farmers, merchants, and soldiers. She stood beside Akhenaten in rituals that lasted long after the horizon glowed red. Her days were filled with movement, yet her manner remained composed, almost serene, as if she carried a stillness inside her, a sanctuary of purpose protected from the noise of politics. But even sanctuaries can feel the weight of the world pressing against their walls. At night, when the rituals ended, and the royal children had fallen asleep under soft linen sheets, Nefertiti often lingered alone on one of the palace balconies. From there she could see the city stretching into the dark, its rooftops bathed in moonlight, its avenues carved like pathways of silver through the desert. She saw a kingdom rising, yet she also sensed the shadows gathering at its edges. She knew that the more she appeared as co-regent, the more resistance would build from those who clung to the old gods, the old hierarchy, the old order. Leadership always demanded a price, and hers, though still unnamed, was beginning to reveal its outline. One evening, while Akhenaten was absorbed in the composition of new hymns, a messenger arrived from the outskirts of Thebes, carrying news that certain nobles had begun holding quiet gatherings. Nothing overt, nothing treasonous, just whispers. But whispers could grow teeth, and teeth in time could bite. Nefertiti read the message with her usual calm, then dismissed the messenger gently. She knew fear would only feed the unrest. Instead, she breathed deeply, letting the warm night air settle her thoughts. She reminded herself that harmony was still possible, that strength, when wielded softly, could become a guiding force rather than a dividing blade. But even she could not deny that a crack had appeared, small, thin, almost invisible, yet present. And as the days passed, that crack began to widen, not shaped by actions, but by perception. A queen rising so high was inspiring to many, but unsettling to some. The truth, however, remained simple. The kingdom needed her. Akhenaten's focus drifted increasingly toward the spiritual realm. He delved deeper into Aten's mysteries, often neglecting the complexities of governance. Without her, Amarna would stumble. Without her hands to steady the empire, its future would be uncertain. So she pressed forward, embracing the duality of her existence, adored and questioned, respected and doubted, indispensable yet vulnerable. And as the tension simmered quietly beneath the surface, she stepped fully into her role, not just between two worlds, but between two futures, one held in the radiant hands of Aten, the other growing silently behind her. And deep down she sensed the truth. The brighter the light, the darker the shade it cast.
Power, even when bathed in sunlight, casts shadows. And in the later years of Amarna, those shadows began to grow long and heavy. Tonight, as your breath softens and your thoughts drift like sand over the quiet desert, we enter the moment when the world Nefertiti helped build began to tremble beneath her feet. The early triumph of Aten's rise had given Amarna a glow, the shimmer of a new dawn, the warmth of a culture reborn. But beneath the radiance, there were fractures, tiny at first, barely visible. Then, slowly, they widened. One of the first tremors came not from politics, but from the wind itself, from the south, from the borders where trade routes once thrived. Caravans arrived late, shipments arrived light. Farmers whispered about fields yielding less grain. The Nile's annual flood had been unpredictable for several seasons, and now the kingdom's food stores struggled to keep pace with a growing population. Hunger crept silently into households that had never known it before. Not enough to cause revolt, but enough to plant the seeds of unease. And then came the sickness, a fever that clung to the lungs and dimmed the eyes. It swept through villages, then through neighborhoods, then through the edges of Amarna itself. Soldiers were the first to fall, then artisans, then servants in the palace. The hymns to Aten continued, the rays of the sun still stretched across the city. But the warmth no longer felt like comfort. It felt indifferent, distant. Akhenaten, consumed by spiritual devotion, insisted Aten's light would protect the faithful. But the people saw something else. Families in mourning, empty workshops, quiet streets. And in the midst of this fragile world, resentment stirred among those who had never accepted the abandonment of the old gods. In Thebes, whispers rose like dust storms. Amun's priests, those stripped of their power, still held sway in the hearts of many. They claimed the sickness was punishment, that Egypt had forsaken the gods who once sheltered them, that Aten was a false hope. Their voices, though distant, drifted into Amarna like cold wind slipping under a door. Nefertiti heard these whispers. She felt them. She carried them in the quiet moments when she stood over power. Even when bathed in sunlight, casts shadows. And in the later years of Amarna, those shadows began to grow long and heavy. Tonight, as your breath softens and your thoughts drift like sand over the quiet desert, we enter the moment when the world Nefertiti helped build began to tremble beneath her feet. The early triumph of Aten's rise had given Amarna a glow, the shimmer of a new dawn, the warmth of a culture reborn. But beneath the radiance, there were fractures, tiny at first, barely visible. Then, slowly, they widened. One of the first tremors came not from politics, but from the wind itself, from the south, from the borders where trade routes once thrived. Caravans arrived late, shipments arrived light. Farmers whispered about fields yielding less grain. The Nile's annual flood had been unpredictable for several seasons, and now the kingdom's food stores struggled to keep pace with a growing population. Hunger crept silently into households that had never known it before. Not enough to cause revolt, but enough to plant the seeds of unease. And then came the sickness, a fever that clung to the lungs and dimmed the eyes. It swept through villages, then through neighborhoods, then through the edges of Amarna itself. Soldiers were the first to fall, then artisans, then servants in the palace. The hymns to Aten continued. The rays of the sun still stretched across the city, but the warmth no longer felt like comfort. It felt indifferent, distant. Akhenaten, consumed by spiritual devotion, insisted Aten's light would protect the faithful. But the people saw something else. Families in mourning, empty workshops, quiet streets. And in the midst of this fragile world, resentment stirred among those who had never accepted the abandonment of the old gods. In Thebes, whispers rose like dust storms. Amun's priests, though stripped of their power, still held sway in the hearts of many. They claimed the sickness was punishment, that Egypt had forsaken the gods who once sheltered them, that Aten was a false hope. Their voices, though distant, drifted into Amarna like cold wind slipping under a door. Nefertiti heard these whispers. She felt them. She carried them in the quiet moments when she stood overlooking the desert, watching the sun fade behind red cliffs. She could sense the strain forming between her people and the world she and Akhenaten had created. Even the artisans felt the tension. The artistic revolution of the Amarna style, once praised for its warmth, its intimacy, its realism, was now criticized by traditionalists who called it un-Egyptian, too soft, too strange. Sculptors who once carved statues of rigid perfection now shaped figures with elongated limbs and tender expressions. To the new generation, it was beautiful. To the old, it was chaos. And slowly, something even more unsettling began to happen, something that would echo through history long after Amarna crumbled. Nefertiti's image began to fade, not gradually in memory, but deliberately in stone. Certain inscriptions no longer included her name. Certain reliefs scraped away the outline of her figure. Some statues were quietly removed from their pedestals. Others were left standing, but with her titles erased. It was subtle at first, barely noticeable to anyone who wasn't looking closely. But Nefertiti noticed. She saw the places where her likeness once stood proudly beside Akhenaten, now replaced with bare stone or newly carved symbols. She felt the shift, the way a person feels temperature drop before a storm. This was not the work of the people, nor the artisans. It was the work of politics, of power rearranging itself behind the scenes, of someone somewhere deciding that Nefertiti's presence needed to be reduced, softened, even erased. And the queen who once shone in Aten's full radiance now stood in a strange twilight, caught between glory and disappearance. Yet she remained calm. Her steps were steady, her voice gentle. But deep inside, she sensed a truth forming like a shadow at sunset. The brighter she had risen, the more dangerous her height had become. And though she did not know it yet, the path ahead would lead her to a place from which few return. Not death, not exile, but something more elusive. Obscurity, the soft vanishing of a queen into history's unanswered questions. And this was only the beginning.
As the tension around Amarna thickened, the city began to change in ways that were subtle at first, too subtle for ordinary eyes, but unmistakable to anyone who had watched the kingdom rise from bare desert. The grand avenues built for royal processions grew quieter. The workshops, once buzzing with energy, seemed to work with less rhythm, fewer hands, and heavier silence. Even the sunlight, so essential to Aten's worship, seemed harsher now, as if the desert reflected it with a weary sharpness. Nefertiti felt this change each time she walked through the palace courts. The guards bowed as they always had, their faces steady, their movements respectful. But beneath the formal gestures, there was something else, a flicker of uncertainty, the faint tremble of men waiting for direction in a world beginning to slip off its axis. She noticed it in the palace scribes, too. They used to greet her with eagerness, ready to record decrees, petitions, and rituals. Now they paused before writing her titles, hesitating for a heartbeat before brushing the reed pen across wet clay. Their hesitation was not rebellion, it was fear. Something had shifted in the hierarchy, though no one had spoken the change aloud. Beyond Amarna's borders, the unrest grew stronger. Caravans carried stories along the trade routes, stories of temples in Thebes holding secret nighttime gatherings, of priests seeing omens in the stars, of nobles sending coded letters with veiled complaints about the imbalance of the two lands. To them, Aten's new world was not a rebirth, it was a fracture, something to be corrected, not celebrated. In this atmosphere, every small inconvenience took on the weight of a sign. A cracked grain silo became an omen, a failed harvest, a curse, a minor illness, an indictment of the royal family. And when people looked for a symbol of their fear, they did not look to Akhenaten. His world had drifted beyond the grasp of earthly concerns. They looked to Nefertiti, the queen who had once been the axis of stability, the calm at the center of the storm. But now they saw her differently. She was too powerful, too visible, too central to the world they no longer trusted. The same traits that once inspired them now unsettled them, and the political currents flowing beneath the surface were not gentle. Behind closed doors, high officials met in low voices. They debated how to redirect loyalty, how to soften Aten's dominance without provoking the king, how to protect themselves if the old religion ever returned. In some records, there were subtle changes, decrees issued less often in Nefertiti's name, or not at all. Royal orders left unsigned by her, but approved by lesser officials. Messages she sent to provincial leaders delayed or rerouted. These were not open acts of defiance. They were the quiet rearrangements of power. Careful, deliberate, meant to reduce her influence without drawing her attention. But Nefertiti noticed everything.
She noticed the shift in the way diplomats addressed her. Once, they had spoken with admiration, impressed by her decisiveness and grace. Now some spoke cautiously, as if evaluating whether she still held the authority to promise anything at all. She noticed the changing pattern of ritual invitations. Fewer ceremonies were held with both rulers side by side. Fewer hymns mentioned her name. Even the sculptors assigned to her portraits seemed to drift away, summoned for other projects. The artistry of Amarna had always mirrored the emotional truth of its rulers, the intimacy of the royal family, the warmth between parents and daughters, the divine connection to Aten. But now, the newest carvings told a colder story. Akhenaten appeared alone more often. Aten's rays reached only for him, and Nefertiti, who once stood at the very heart of this divine tableau, found her place erased, replaced, or simply forgotten. Yet she did not confront anyone. She did not raise her voice or demand explanations. Instead, she remained composed, navigating each shift with quiet dignity. She understood something fundamental about power, that it is most fragile when one tries to grip it too tightly. She had risen with grace, and now she would endure the descent with the same quiet strength. But within that calm, a question began to echo. Who was orchestrating this erasure? Was it Akhenaten himself, retreating further into spiritual isolation? Was it the officials who feared the empire's instability? Or was it someone else entirely? Someone preparing for a future in which Nefertiti's name could no longer stand beside the pharaohs. As these uncertainties gathered like a storm beyond the desert horizon, Nefertiti sensed that her world, so carefully built, so deeply cherished, was shifting away from her, and somewhere in the heart of Amarna, the first quiet footsteps towards her disappearance had already begun.
In the final months before her disappearance, the world around Nefertiti grew quieter. Not in peace, but in the way a room grows still when someone is about to blow out a candle. Amarna continued to glitter beneath Aten's steady rays, but something essential had slipped away, leaving the city feeling hollow, like a beautiful shell missing the creature that once lived inside. The shift became unmistakable the day Nefertiti found a chamber wall in the palace, partially recarved. She had walked through that hallway hundreds of times. It was a place she knew well, a place where artisans had once carved a relief of her standing beside Akhenaten, both of them raising offerings to Aten. But now, when she paused in front of the carving, she saw that her figure had been chiseled away. Not fully, just enough to blur her outline, enough to make her look like a ghost in stone. The face had been smoothed. The crown she once wore had been scraped flat. Her name, once carved proudly beneath the image, had been replaced with empty plaster. She stood there for a long moment, her breath warm against the still air. She didn't call for guards. She didn't summon the artisan responsible. She simply placed her fingertips against the cool stone where her face had once been. And in that moment, she understood. This was no accident. It was a decision.
a message, and perhaps the beginning of an ending she had long sensed but never spoken aloud. Soon after, more changes appeared. Her name vanished from festival lists. Her presence faded from official hymns. Tablets that once recorded her decrees were replaced with new ones bearing different seals. The transition was so carefully orchestrated that it felt almost ritualistic, like someone was performing a slow, deliberate unmaking. And yet, no one confronted her. No one denied her. No one warned her. Silence was the sharpest blade of all. Even Akhenaten grew more distant. He spent long hours isolated in the great temple, composing hymns and seeking visions. When they did speak, his words were gentle but unfocused, as if he were holding on to the material world only loosely, like a thin thread slipping between his fingers. Perhaps he did not see the fading of her name. Perhaps he chose not to see. Or perhaps he believed Aten had chosen a new path, leaving even his beloved queen outside the circle of divine purpose. Nefertiti did not plead. She did not argue. In the soft glow of evening, she wandered through the city she had helped raise from sand. She walked past the open-air altars, past sunlit colonnades, past artisans sculpting the elongated features that had once celebrated her grace. She looked at it all with eyes neither bitter nor broken, just quietly aware that the world she shaped had begun to reshape itself around her absence. Rumors spread quietly through the palace. Some said the royal daughters had taken on more ceremonial roles. Others whispered that a new co-regent had emerged, a figure scholars now suspect might have been Smenkhare, or perhaps even a new identity assumed by someone within the royal family. The truth was more like desert wind, present but impossible to hold. And then one dawn, Nefertiti simply stopped appearing. No procession, no royal decree, no farewell. One day she walked the halls of Amarna, the next day she did not. The palace murmured with questions. Servants spoke of a closed chamber. Guards recalled orders that no one approach her private quarters. Scribes noted the abrupt halt of her official correspondence. But no body was presented, no tomb announced, no mourning ritual held. It was as if she had dissolved into the very sunlight she once embodied, not fading in death, but in disappearance. The queen who once stood at the center of Aten's radiance now existed only as an absence, a shape missing from carvings, a name erased from stone, a presence replaced by silence. And history, unable to fill the void, carried the mystery forward through centuries. But in the stillness of that ancient moment, before her memory crumbled beneath shifting dynasties, one truth lingered like a final whisper in the desert air. Great power does not always end with a fall. Sometimes it ends with a vanishing.
There are moments in history when someone disappears so completely, so silently, that their absence becomes louder than any presence they ever held. And tonight, as you relax deeper into the softness of the dark, we drift into the most haunting chapter of Nefertiti's story. The moment when Egypt's most radiant queen simply vanished. There are moments in history when someone disappears so completely, so silently, that their absence becomes louder than any presence they ever held. And tonight, as you relax deeper into the softness of the dark, we drift into the most haunting chapter of Nefertiti's story, the moment when Egypt's most radiant queen simply vanished. Scholars estimate that the disappearance happened around the 12th year of Akhenaten's reign, a time when Amarna was beginning to crack under the weight of famine, disease, and religious upheaval. But no inscription marks the moment. No royal decree announces a passing. No lamentation hymn was carved to honor her. One year she was everywhere, etched into stone, sung in hymns, depicted beside Aten as the living image of divine grace. And then, almost overnight, she was nowhere. It was as if someone reached into the timeline of Egypt and pulled her out. The strangeness of her disappearance begins with the silence. Egyptian royalty did not vanish quietly. Their deaths were recorded with ritual precision, funeral processions, carved stelae, tombs sealed with spells, priests chanting for days. But for Nefertiti, there was nothing. No tomb, no coffin, no mourning, no record. Only the soft echo of absence. Some ancient scribes continued writing for years afterward. They documented the festivals, the offerings, the daily rituals in the great temple. And in their accounts, the queen's name, once unavoidable, simply stopped appearing. Not scratched out, not replaced, not cursed or condemned, just gone. The sudden nature of this disappearance would later send historians searching for clues in the most unlikely places: obscure quarries, fragments of ostraca, hints of names half erased on temple walls. And among those whispers of stone, a faint trace emerges. A single inscription found at the limestone quarries of Deir Abu Hanis, dated to year 16 of Akhenaten's reign, 4 years after Nefertiti supposedly vanished. It speaks of a great royal wife, Neferneferuaten Nefertiti. The name is long, regal, unmistakably hers. It is as though the stone itself insists she was still alive, still ruling, still present. But if she lived until year 16, then where had she been? Why had she disappeared from all royal records in year 12? And why did her image vanish from monuments at the exact moment she should have stood strongest? These contradictions form the heart of the mystery, an ache in history that scholars still chase like a dream evaporating at dawn. Some believe she stepped aside voluntarily, giving power to a new figure. Others believe she was forced into obscurity, perhaps by political opponents or by the shifting tides of Atenism. There are those who suspect darker outcomes: poison, assassination, a quiet murder hidden beneath the sands. And still others believe she never vanished at all, only changed, that she may have taken on a new royal identity, ruling as Neferneferuaten or even Smenkhkare, guiding Egypt not as queen, but as king. In this chapter, though, we linger not on theories, but on the atmosphere of the disappearance itself, the moment when the world seemed to exhale, leaving behind a breathless silence where one of Egypt's brightest lights had once stood. What remains is the haunting stillness of a palace waking up one morning to find its queen gone, her perfume fading from the chambers,
her footsteps missing from the halls, her throne cool to the touch. Servants looked for her, officials waited for her, scribes prepared tablets she never signed, and Akhenaten, he left no words, as if he too had stepped into a realm where the line between truth and denial blurred like heat over the desert. And so the mystery began, not with a scream, not with a war cry, but with a quiet mourning in Amarna and a queen who no longer came to stand in the sun.
When someone as powerful as Nefertiti disappears, the silence that follows becomes a canvas on which every whisper, every fear, and every hope begins to paint its own story. And so, in the years after she vanished from the records of Amarna, Egypt became a land filled with shadows of theories, each one drifting like sand, shifting with the wind, never settling long enough to reveal the truth. Some believed her disappearance marked a simple change in political climate, that after the 12th year of Akhenaten's reign, factions within the palace decided that her influence had grown too great, too central, too dazzling for a world already cracking under the weight of turmoil. They imagined her stepping aside quietly, moving into a secondary palace, living in dignified solitude while another figure rose to prominence. But that version of the story felt too clean, too gentle for the sharp edges of politics. Others imagined a darker path, a quiet purge orchestrated not by the king, but by those who feared the queen's reach. These whispers said she might have been pushed out, stripped of titles, her supporters silenced one by one, until she found herself standing alone in a labyrinth of conspiracies. And yet, there is no sign of fear in her final appearances. Her statues, before they are abruptly altered, show a woman calm, strong, serene. Not someone fleeing danger, but someone still in control. That contradiction is the heart of the mystery. Then came the rumors of death. Some believed she succumbed to the plague that ravaged Egypt during those turbulent years. The disease had no mercy. Soldiers, artisans, servants, even members of the royal household were struck down. If the queen had truly fallen to illness, Egypt should have mourned her. A public death, a sacred burial, a carved tomb. But none of that existed. Not a word, not a symbol, not a mourning hymn. A queen who had rewritten Egyptian religion would never have been allowed to slip quietly into the shadows of history, unless someone wanted her to. Others whispered of self-exile. Imagine Nefertiti standing at the edge of the cliffs above Amarna, watching the sun drift behind the horizon, realizing the vision she and Akhenaten had built was collapsing from within. Some say she walked away voluntarily, leaving the capital to escape the political storm, choosing silence over conflict, perhaps even seeking refuge in distant temples or desert sanctuaries. A queen stepping into her own disappearance. But then there is the most tantalizing possibility of all. The possibility that Nefertiti did not disappear at all, that she changed, that she transformed, that she slipped into a new identity so seamlessly that history still hasn't recognized it fully. The Der Ubhanes inscription, dated to year 16 of Akhenaten's reign, mentions a great royal wife, Neferneferu Aten Nefertiti, a name unmistakably hers. 4 years after her supposed disappearance, 4 years after she vanished from every official record in Amarna. That inscription is like a single heartbeat echoing through centuries, a sign that she was still alive, still active, still close to the throne. And so some historians wonder,
Did Nefertiti step into power not as queen, but as king? Could she have taken the name Neferuaten as a royal identity and ruled alongside Akhenaten in secret? Or, perhaps most controversially, did she become Smenkhare, a mysterious co-regent who appears suddenly in the historical record with no clear origin? It would not be the first time a woman in Egypt seized the throne. Hatshepsut had done it generations earlier, ruling as king with the regalia and titles of a pharaoh. Nefertiti, with her influence, her education, her political mastery, could have repeated that path, becoming the hidden ruler behind the veil of a new royal name. And yet, even this theory carries shadows. If she ruled as a male king, why erase her earlier images? Why remove her name from monuments instead of transforming it? Why carve away her presence from scenes where she once stood proudly beside Akhenaten? Unless someone wished to hide the transition, hide the truth, hide her. In the soft uncertainty of these theories, the mystery of Nefertiti becomes something else. Not a disappearance, but a shifting of light, a shape seen at the edge of vision, present but intangible. And as we drift deeper into the quiet night of this story, one truth becomes clear. Whatever happened to her, Egypt never spoke of it aloud.
There is a moment in every unsolved mystery when the facts begin to feel like shifting sand, too soft to stand on, too unstable to build anything certain. And as we drift deeper into Nefertiti's disappearance, that moment becomes unmistakable. The silence after her last recorded appearance feels deliberate, almost crafted, as if the palace itself decided to exhale and erase her from the breath it once carried so proudly. But history, even when smudged, leaves fingerprints, and one of those faint marks sits in the raw cliffs of Deir Abu Hinis, a quarry where stone blocks were once carved for the temples of Aten, the sun god whom Nefertiti and Akhenaten worshipped so fiercely. Hidden among the tool marks and unfinished reliefs, there is a single inscription, faint, worn, almost lost to time, dated to year 16 of Akhenaten's reign. 16. 4 years after the queen supposedly vanished, 4 years after her name was last seen in Amarna. Yet here, carved into the stone, are the words, "The great royal wife, Neferuaten Nefertiti." Not a memory, not a rumor, a record, a heartbeat of truth. Imagine the worker who carved it standing in the quarry as sunlight spilled across the rock, his chisel striking the stone, each tap creating a trace meant to honor the living queen. He did not know that centuries later, his quiet work would become the spark that reignited one of Egypt's greatest mysteries. Why was her name there? Why in year 16? Why, when official records insist she had vanished by year 12? Some scholars believe the inscription proves she never fell from favor, that she continued to hold her title as great royal wife or something greater, even as the court at Amarna seemed to erase her from the court. Others argue that the quarry inscription belonged to an earlier carving accidentally mislabeled. But the stone does not lie easily, and the carving style matches the late Amarna period, the era when Egypt was already bending beneath the weight of change.
Then there is a third possibility, that the inscription belongs to someone else entirely, a successor taking her name, a ruler honoring her legacy. But the titles, the phrasing, the royal formula, all echo her, not an imitator. It feels like her voice reaching out through time, a whisper caught in mineral veins. And if she was alive in year 16, then where was she? Some imagine her ruling from the shadows, her name hidden intentionally to prevent uprising from those who worshipped the old gods. Perhaps she served as the stabilizing force behind Akhenaten's later years, her power concealed but intact. Others wonder if she acted as co-regent, guiding the empire while the king weakened, his health declining, his reforms faltering. The Der Abu Hinnis inscription becomes a lantern in the dark, illuminating new paths through the maze of theories. But lanterns cast shadows too. Because if Nefertiti was alive, active, honored in year 16, then why scrub away her presence in the city she helped build? Why alter her statues? Why replace her name with others? Unless there was a change so profound that the court needed to rewrite her identity entirely. Unless she transformed from queen to king. Unless her new name, Neferneferu Aten, or even Smenkhkare, had to replace her old one for reasons we may never fully grasp. And once that transformation occurred, perhaps the old reminders, her statues as queen, her titles as wife, became threats, contradictions, pieces that needed erasing. Not out of hatred, but out of necessity. The past had to be reshaped for the present to survive. And in that reshaping, she disappeared. Not in death, but in language. Not in reality, but in record. And that is a disappearance far more powerful than any exile or assassination. A disappearance that can hide in plain sight for 3,000 years. So as we rest in the dim quiet of this chapter, drifting through the soft sands of possibilities, one truth becomes unshakable. Something happened to Nefertiti. Something so immense that Egypt chose silence over explanation. And that silence, heavy and deliberate, is why her story still lingers in the world's imagination. Why her name still echoes through museums, documentaries, and bedtime stories whispered into the dark. Why the world still asks, where did she go? And why no answer has ever settled the dust. Because the mystery remains unsolved. And the unsolved has its own gravity, its own pull, its own endless night. And so as we close this part of her story, one final thought drifts through the quiet. The unanswered truth of Nefertiti's fate still leaves the entire world spinning in its wake.
There is a particular stillness in ancient history when a woman rises high enough to touch the crown of a king. It is the kind of stillness that feels both sacred and dangerous, as if the world is holding its breath. And in the long chronicle of Egypt's pharaohs, only a handful of women ever stepped across that invisible threshold. Among them, Hatshepsut stands as a towering figure, a queen who transformed herself into a king with a boldness that shook tradition.
She wore the false beard, claimed the regalia of Horus, and ruled with authority that rivaled any man. Her statues portrayed her not as a woman ascending to power, but as a king fully formed, sculpted in stone to echo the strength of a lineage she dared to join. Egypt accepted her, even if grudgingly, because the land needed stability. But after her death, her stepson erased her legacy from temples and monuments, chiseling her name from the stone she once commanded, a deliberate concealment, a quiet rewriting of history. And then, centuries later, something eerily similar may have happened again, this time to Nefertiti. The question lies in the whispers that drift across time. Could Nefertiti have done what Hatshepsut once dared? Place the royal crown upon her head and rule as pharaoh? The archaeological evidence forms a constellation of subtle clues, scattered but luminous when viewed together. Scholars analyzing the Amarna period point to inscriptions referring to a ruler known as Ankh-Keperure Nefer-Nefer-Rowaytan, whose name includes unmistakable elements tied to Nefertiti. Her epithet, effective for her husband, appears in some versions of this royal name, suggesting a feminine presence behind the throne, a ruler whose authority was intimately connected to Akhenaten. This is not the language used for a son, a nephew, or a distant successor. It is a phrase shaped for a queen, a partner, someone who stood beside the king long before the throne ever shifted. And when Akhenaten's health declined and the empire teetered under the weight of religious transformation, famine, and plague, someone needed to hold the reins. That someone may well have been Nefertiti. Imagine her not simply as the queen with the elegant crown and poised profile, but as a ruler stepping into the role of pharaoh, quietly, strategically, without spectacle. A shift not announced to the public, but recognized in the sacred chambers of power. She could have taken the throne under the name Nefer-Nefer-Rowaytan, ruling as co-regent and perhaps even outliving Akhenaten. And yet, if this transformation did occur, it would explain a strange paradox that has puzzled historians for decades. Why do some monuments preserve her titles with reverence, while others erase her name entirely? Why would a queen so central to the religion of Aten be both honored and erased within the same generation? Unless, like Hatshepsut, her ascension threatened the delicate balance of political legitimacy. A woman who becomes king must inevitably strain the boundaries of tradition, and the priests loyal to the old gods, the gods Akhenaten had exiled, could not afford for her reign to survive. The return of Amun after the fall of Amarna required more than a shift in theology. It required the rewriting of an era. The city Akhenaten built had to be abandoned. The temples he raised had to be purified. The pharaoh he had been and the pharaoh Nefertiti may have become had to be erased. And so, in the quiet unraveling of the Amarna period, as the capital was moved back to Thebes and the worship of Amun restored, history folded itself tightly around her story. Her titles were scratched away. Her images were replaced. Her name slipped between the cracks of papyrus and stone. But what if this erasure is not the end of her story? What if it is the very thing that confirms her power? Because history does not erase the insignificant. Only those who change the world leave shadows this large. And as we drift deeper into the soft stillness of this chapter, the question becomes impossible to ignore. If Nefertiti truly wore the crown of Pharaoh, what else did history choose to hide?
There is a peculiar tenderness in the way history hides the truth. Not with violence, not with abrupt endings, but with soft erasures. One chiseled name here, one replaced statue there. The quiet removal of a title that once shone brightly in royal inscriptions. And when we look closely at the final years of the Amarna period, those gentle erasures begin to form a shape, not of absence, but of transformation. If Nefertiti truly became Pharaoh under the name Nefer-Neferuaten, then the record of her rule would not look like a new chapter. It would look like a rewriting of the previous one, a blending, a merging, a queen dissolving into a king through the ink of scribes and the decision of priests, leaving behind a trail so faint that future generations would have to squint to see it. The evidence that survives is subtle, fragile as papyrus edges dried under millennia of desert air. In several inscriptions, the name Ankh-Keperure Nefer-Neferuaten appears with epithets unmistakably feminine, yet accompanied by cartouches reserved for pharaohs. This contradiction is not a mistake. It is a signature, a quiet nod to a ruler who straddled two worlds, the world of queenship and the world of kingship. And in that liminal space, Nefertiti may have ruled not as a shadow beside Akhenaten, but as a sovereign with full authority. Imagine her walking through the palace corridors of Amarna during its final years, no longer simply the queen who stood beside the sun-worshipping king, but the one who ensured the sun still rose over a realm that was cracking under pressure. Outside the palace walls, Egypt was changing in ways that frightened its people. The cult of Aten, once celebrated for its brightness and purity, had become a symbol of disruption. Grain shortages troubled the land, foreign threats grew. The priests of Amun waited like coiled shadows in Thebes, watching the religious experiment unravel. And in the midst of this storm, the figure who may have held the kingdom together was someone the world never expected, a woman. But for Nefertiti to rule openly as Pharaoh, the world of tradition would have needed to bend again, just as it had for Hatshepsut. Yet this time, the bend was too fragile. The state Akhenaten created had fractured the country too deeply, and the idea of another unconventional ruler may have been too much for the old guard to tolerate. This is where the story of Nefer-Neferuaten becomes entwined with disappearance. If Nefertiti ascended the throne, then her reign would have coincided with the fading of the Aten religion. And if she tried to preserve it, out of loyalty to her husband or to their shared vision, the backlash would have been immense.
Egypt was already preparing to return to the worship of Amun. The priests were regaining confidence. The military elite sought stability. The officials of the old temples wanted restoration. A ruler tied so closely to Aten, even as Pharaoh, would have been caught between worlds, unable to move forward, unable to turn back. So her reign, if it existed, may have been deliberately quiet or deliberately hidden. After all, the fastest way to restore stability is not to record a controversial ruler, but to erase one. And as the Amarna period collapsed, the erasure began. Temples dedicated to Aten were abandoned. Walls once carved with sun rays reaching toward the royal family were buried under new layers of stone. Statues with elongated features, a hallmark of Amarna art, were smashed or repurposed. And through this sweeping transformation, the memory of a pharaoh named Neferuaten blurred. A blur that, when traced backward, looks suspiciously like the silhouette of Nefertiti. It brings us to the quiet question that hums beneath every theory. If Nefertiti ruled, why hide her reign? Perhaps because she was the last defender of a failed religious revolution, or because her authority threatened the legitimacy of future kings, or because acknowledging her meant confronting the power a woman could wield in a world built for men. And so the world chose silence, a silence thick enough to obscure even a pharaoh. But silence has edges, and as we lie here in the stillness of this chapter, following those edges with gentle curiosity, something becomes clear. The story of Neferuaten isn't just a missing piece of Egypt's past. It is a reflection of how history decides who is remembered and who is rewritten.
If we imagine the final years of the Amarna era as a dimly lit corridor, then Nefertiti stands at its center like a flickering flame, sometimes bright, sometimes fading, but never fully extinguished. And as we follow that flame deeper into the shadows, the most haunting question lingers, not simply whether she ruled, but why the world tried so hard to hide the answer. To understand that, we must step into the silence that followed Akhenaten's decline. The city of Amarna, once a radiant symbol of religious revolution, had begun to dim. Its wide avenues, carved hastily in devotion to Aten, echoed with uncertainty. The sun discs painted on its temple walls remained bright, but the beliefs beneath them were fraying. People whispered again the names of the old gods, Amun, Osiris, Ptah, like distant memories returning from exile. And in that moment of spiritual fracture, Egypt needed a figure strong enough to hold the realm steady. For a time, that figure might have been Nefertiti under the royal name Neferuaten. But rule alone was not enough. Amarna was more than a city. It was a manifesto carved into stone, a challenge to 1,000 years of tradition. To undo it required not just leadership, but redirection. A pharaoh aligned with Aten would complicate that. And as the storm gathered, the political reality became undeniable. Egypt would soon return to Amun. The temples of Thebes would reopen. The priests would reclaim their influence. And the memory of the heretic king and his circle would become dangerous.
So imagine the predicament of those who came after. If Nefertiti ruled as pharaoh, even briefly, her reign would be inseparable from the Aten experiment. Preserving her legacy would mean preserving part of the very system Egypt was eager to bury. And so, slowly, carefully, the erasure began. Not out of spite, but out of necessity. Not because she failed, but because her success threatened the narrative the new rulers needed to restore stability. But erasing a pharaoh is like trying to hide a mountain with a handful of sand. You can cover parts of it, smooth the edges, hide the entrances, but the shape still remains. Even now, faint inscriptions, scattered artifacts, and artistic clues continue to reveal fragments of a reign too important to disappear fully. But the more we piece them together, the stranger the picture becomes. Some fragments show a ruler with unmistakably feminine titles. Others show a king. Some emphasize devotion to Aten. Others depict attempts to mend diplomacy with neighboring powers. It is as if two stories are being told at once. The rise of a queen stepping into unprecedented authority, and the deliberate blurring of that rise to protect a fragile nation struggling to find its footing. And that brings us to the most delicate possibility, that Nefertiti's reign was meant to be temporary, a bridge between Akhenaten's failing vision and the restoration that followed. A caretaker pharaoh, a stabilizing hand invisible to the public eye, a ruler whose existence was intentionally obscured once the transition was complete. If so, her erasure was not a punishment, but a curtain being drawn after the final act of a play that could never be performed again. But even if this interpretation holds, one truth remains. Someone thought her reign worth hiding, and that is what makes the mystery so powerful. Because history rarely hides what is ordinary, it hides what is transformative, what unsettles, what challenges the foundation of memory itself. So as we drift into the gentle quiet of this chapter's end, the questions settle softly beside us like desert dust falling on forgotten stone. If Nefertiti truly became Pharaoh, guiding Egypt through its most fragile moment, what truth was so monumental that history chose to cover it instead of telling it? From queen to pharaoh, what was the secret the past wanted to erase?
If every dynasty leaves behind a ghost, then the ghost of Amarna is a woman's face. An impossibly serene, hauntingly perfect face, carved in limestone and painted with colors that somehow survived 3,000 years of silence. It is the face the world now knows as the bust of Nefertiti, a face millions have seen, even if they know little about the woman behind it. And yet, as gentle as her expression is, as graceful as the contours appear under museum lights, the story of this sculpture is anything but gentle. It is a story woven with beauty and buried under politics, cultural conflict, and the kind of ambition that lingers far longer than stone. When the German archaeological team, led by Ludwig Borchardt,
uncovered the bust in 1912, deep inside the workshop of the sculptor Thutmose at Amarna. It was described with a single phrase recorded in Borchardt's notebook: a masterpiece. But the quietness of that moment conceals the storm that would follow. According to some accounts, Borchardt knew instantly that he had found something extraordinary, something too extraordinary, perhaps, to risk losing. And so, as the story goes, the artifact was classified in a way that allowed it to leave Egypt with less attention than it deserved. Others argue this tale is exaggerated, reshaped by decades of tension between nations and museums. But one truth remains unshaken. The world first saw Nefertiti's face only because she crossed borders silently. When her bust was displayed in Berlin in 1924, the reaction was immediate and electric. Crowds gathered not merely to admire the craftsmanship, but to marvel at the feeling she evoked: timeless grace, quiet authority, a beauty that felt both intimate and unreachable. Her single remaining eye seemed to look not at the viewer, but through them, as if examining the centuries that separated her from her own world. Yet this serene moment in the spotlight was also the beginning of controversy. Egypt, shocked to realize what had left its soil, demanded her return almost immediately. Over the decades, the requests grew louder, then formal, then political, and each time Germany refused. Some said the bust was legally obtained. Others said it was taken through deception. Still others believed no paperwork could justify removing the soul of a civilization. And so the bust, still, quiet, unmoving, became the center of a tug-of-war between two nations, each claiming guardianship over her legacy. But perhaps the most remarkable part of her story is not the legality of her removal or the politics surrounding her display. It is the way her image traveled so far beyond the museum walls. As the 20th century unfolded, Nefertiti's face blossomed into a global icon. Her silhouette appeared in fashion designs. Her profile was recreated in advertisements. Artists referenced her elongated neck and balanced features as symbols of idealized beauty. Feminist movements embraced her as a metaphor for strength, sovereignty, and the hidden power of women erased by historical narratives. She appeared on magazine covers, posters, book illustrations, and even makeup branding. The world found in her face what it wanted to see: elegance, mystery, authority, longing, resilience. Yet every reproduction, every printed poster, every stylized outline drifting across culture had the same unspoken foundation: the original bust sitting silently under glass, watching the modern world reinterpret her again and again. And in that reinterpretation, something profound occurs. The sculpture becomes more than an artifact. It becomes a mirror, a reflection of the desires, dreams, fears, and projections of the people who look at it. But behind that mirror, behind the layers of cultural fascination, lies a deeper question. The bust immortalized Nefertiti's beauty, but did it immortalize her truth? Or did it help bury it? Because the serene face we see is not the face of a woman who navigated power, turmoil, political storms, and perhaps even the throne itself. It is an idealized version created not to narrate her life, but to symbolize its perfection. And perfection can be its own kind of mask. So as we drift into the soft glow of this chapter, one thought lingers like a whispered breath. The bust may have preserved her image, but what parts of her story did it hide?
There is a quiet irony in the journey of Nefertiti's bust, an artifact crafted to honor a queen who once stood at the center of Egypt's power, only to spend the next century standing at the center of a tug-of-war between nations. And like all great conflicts hidden beneath polished museum glass, the truth behind the controversy isn't sharp or sudden. It's layered, soft, almost dreamlike. To understand it, we must return to the moment of her rediscovery. When Borchart's team divided the artifacts found during excavation, the rules of the time stated that Egypt and the German expedition were to split the discoveries equally. But what equally meant depended heavily on what one chose to reveal and what one chose to conceal. Some accounts claim Borchardt presented Nefertiti's bust in dim light, wrapped partially, downplaying its beauty so it would be placed among the items allocated to Germany. The story says the official who approved the division saw only a colored, plastered head, unremarkable compared to golden coffins and carved reliefs, and allowed it to leave the country. Whether this version is myth or truth remains debated, but the result is undeniable. The bust traveled quietly to Germany, nearly unnoticed. Once in Berlin, however, its unveiling electrified the world. Egypt, upon realizing what had slipped through its fingers, demanded her return, but Germany refused, arguing that all protocols had been followed. Over time, the dispute grew more personal, almost emotional. Egypt claimed the artifact was removed by deception. Germany insisted it was rightful property. And as decades passed, the bust transformed from an archaeological treasure into a symbol of cultural identity, national pride, and the intimate question of who has the right to own history. The tension intensified during World War II, when the bust was hidden away in air raid shelters to prevent damage. Even in darkness, she remained a coveted presence, an icon so valuable that armies feared losing her. And after the war, as the world tried to rebuild, Egypt renewed its claims. They argued that Nefertiti, one of their most beloved queens, belonged in her homeland, among the sands and temples that once echoed her name. But Germany, having woven her deeply into its cultural institutions, refused again. It is a strange thing to witness, a statue that cannot move, cannot speak, cannot choose, yet becomes the center of a centuries-long debate. A silent queen presiding over arguments far louder than any she faced in life. But perhaps the deepest layer of controversy isn't legal or political. It's emotional, because the bust does not simply depict Nefertiti, it shapes her. It defines how the world imagines her: graceful, calm, perfect, symmetrical.
But archaeology teaches us that perfection is a crafted illusion. The bust is not a portrait in the modern sense. It is an ideal, a message, a symbol of divinity and elegance created by the hands of Thutmose. And symbols can be dangerous when they overshadow the truth. As modern culture embraced her, from fashion runways to feminist art, from perfume ads to magazine covers, Nefertiti's face became a global shorthand for beauty and female power. Yet the real woman, the strategist, the political force, the potential pharaoh, began to fade behind the idealized image. It is almost poetic. A queen whose historical record was erased in antiquity became famous again through another kind of erasure, replaced by the version the modern world preferred. And as the lights of Berlin's Neuest Museum glow softly over her face each night, the world continues to debate not only her ownership, but her meaning. Is she a piece of ancient Egypt, a masterpiece of German discovery, a global icon of beauty, or a reminder of how easily history can be shaped, edited, softened, and hidden? As we rest in this thought, the soft hum of this mystery brushes against us like sand carried by wind across a forgotten desert road. The bust remains still, the world around her changes, and the questions, old, new, and unending, continue to drift like dust around her silent gaze.
And so, as Nefertiti's bust stands beneath soft museum lights, polished by decades of admiration, another layer of mystery quietly forms around her, one that doesn't belong to ancient Egypt, nor to the archaeologists who unearthed her, nor even to the countries fighting over her presence. This final layer belongs to all of us living today, shaped by the way modern culture has embraced, reimagined, and sometimes distorted the queen whose voice vanished long before her beauty reached the world. Because Nefertiti has not only survived as a relic, she has evolved into a symbol, fluid, powerful, and endlessly reinterpreted. In fashion, her silhouette appears on runways, transformed into gold collars, angular crowns, and sculpted hairstyles echoing her famous headdress. In magazines, she becomes a shorthand for elegance. In perfume ads, a muse of sophistication. In feminist art, she rises as an icon of female authority, the woman who stood beside, and perhaps even above, a pharaoh. And in the digital age, where images travel faster than stories, her face has been used everywhere, from logos to album covers to virtual avatars. Yet behind each reinvention lies a quiet paradox. The more she is celebrated, the farther we drift from the real Nefertiti, whose life was shaped not just by beauty, but by political skill, spiritual leadership, and decisions that redirected an entire kingdom's fate. The world remembers her serene expression, but history whispers a more complicated truth. Perhaps this is why her bust draws such fascination, not because it answers questions, but because it hides them so elegantly. When visitors stand before her in Berlin, they are struck first by beauty, then by the eerie sensation that she is both present and unreachable. Her gaze is forward, yet inward, focused on something beyond sight. Some describe it as poise, others see melancholy, but many feel something deeper, a sense that the bust is not merely a portrait, but a message she never had the chance to convey. And that message shifts depending on who receives it.
To Egypt, she represents cultural identity, a queen stolen during a period of imbalance. To Germany, she symbolizes the height of archaeological discovery and museum prestige. To artists, she is a canvas of ideals. To historians, a puzzle missing its most important pieces. To dreamers, she is eternal, floating between myth and memory. Yet the truth behind her disappearance remains untouched. The bust may be perfect, but her story is jagged, incomplete. And this contrast between the flawless sculpture and the fractured history creates a tension that captivates anyone who encounters her. In a way, her modern fame echoes the life she once lived. During the Amarna period, art transformed dramatically. Faces softened, bodies elongated. Emotions became visible for the first time in Egyptian royal portraiture. Nefertiti stood at the center of this shift, a living muse of a revolutionary aesthetic. Now, thousands of years later, she stands again at the center of a new artistic wave. But while modern culture polishes her image, archaeology continues to unearth new fragments that complicate the narrative. DNA studies, tomb searches, scanning expeditions within the Valley of the Kings, each discovery raises possibilities. Could the real Nefertiti have looked different than the bust? Could she have lived longer than records show? Could she have ruled under another name? The more we investigate, the more her story fractures into shimmering possibilities. And perhaps that is why she endures so strongly. Because Nefertiti does not give us answers, she gives us questions. Questions soft enough to fall asleep to, yet deep enough to linger in the mind long after the story ends. So tonight, as we rest within the gentle rhythm of her mystery, imagine the queen not as a frozen figure, but as a presence, moving quietly through history, slipping between shadows and sunlight, shaping kingdoms by her actions, and shaping the modern world by her absence. A queen erased from walls, yet resurrected in marble perfection. A woman whose silence echoes louder than chronicles. And as the chapter closes, one truth gently rises through the stillness. The bust is only the shell. The woman behind it remains elusive. And the greatest secrets of Nefertiti, queen, pharaoh, icon, mystery, still sleep beneath the sand's untouched eye time, waiting for someone patient enough, quiet enough to listen.
There is a special kind of silence that settles over the Valley of the Kings at night, a silence so complete that even the desert seems to pause its breathing. And somewhere beneath that silence, beneath layers of limestone and collapsed corridors and sealed chambers older than memory itself, archaeologists believe the answer to Nefertiti's final mystery still sleeps. Our story begins with a discovery that shook the world nearly a century ago, the tomb of Tutankhamun. Hidden under debris, overlooked by countless expeditions, it was found almost by accident. But as the years passed, researchers began to suspect that the boy king's resting place might not be as isolated as it seemed. CT scans of the walls, radar sweeps through the stone, and subtle architectural clues suggested that behind the north wall of KV-62, another chamber might exist. A chamber untouched, unopened, unspoken of for thousands of years. And in the quiet excitement of these findings,
one name whispered through the archaeological world with a tremor of awe: Nefertiti. The clues were faint but tantalizing. Radar reflections hinted at hollow spaces. Plaster patterns suggested sealed doorways. The alignment of the tomb itself felt unusual, too asymmetrical, as if carved hastily from a design meant for someone far more important. And so a theory arose that Tutankhamun's tomb was never meant for him, that it had been repurposed, that it once belonged to a queen whose reign had been erased, whose memory had been scrubbed, but whose secrets had never entirely died. But the mystery deepened when researchers examined certain mummies classified as the younger lady. DNA analysis revealed she was Tutankhamun's mother, and though she was identified genetically, her royal name remains unknown. Some saw in her profile a resemblance to the famous bust. Others disagreed, reminding the world that beauty captured in sculpture is often more dream than reality. Still, the possibility stirred something ancient in the imagination. Could this unidentified mummy be Nefertiti, or was the truth buried deeper still? Modern archaeology has become a dance between technology and intuition. Where once researchers relied solely on chisels, oil lamps, and patient hands, they now wield CT scanners that peer through wrappings without disturbing a thread. DNA sequencing that resurrect family trees long turned to dust, and imaging techniques capable of detecting chambers hidden behind meters of stone. And yet, for all our advances, Nefertiti's tomb remains elusive. Perhaps it collapsed. Perhaps it was carved somewhere unexpected. Or perhaps, as some theorize, she was buried in a chamber so deliberately concealed that even the shifting sands of time could not betray its presence. What makes the mystery even more powerful is the emotional weight behind it. Finding Nefertiti would not be like finding another mummy. It would be the rediscovery of a missing chapter in human history, one that was deliberately erased, then rediscovered in fragments, then lost again. The world has seen her face in polished stone. We have imagined her life through art, religion, and speculation. But her death, her burial, her final moments, they float in darkness, waiting. And perhaps that is why archaeologists continue to return to the Valley of the Kings year after year, despite scorching heat, shifting sandstorms, and the endless challenge of deciphering a civilization that spoke in symbols and hid truths behind metaphor. They return because somewhere, in a silent chamber still untouched, may lie the queen who changed Egypt, waiting for the moment when the world is ready to hear the part of her story that has never been told. And as we rest here tonight, drifting gently with the hum of ancient secrets, the desert holds its breath once more, guarding the hidden place where Nefertiti's shadow still lingers, patient and unbroken, beneath the weight of time.
In the quiet hum of modern laboratories, far from the desert winds and golden dunes of ancient Thebes, another kind of archaeology is unfolding, one built not on chisels and lanterns, but on invisible light, genetic codes, and computers that can unravel thousands of years with the precision of a whisper. If the Valley of the Kings is where Nefertiti's tomb might lie, then these labs are where her story breathes again. The first tool reshaping our understanding is the CT scanner, a machine that sees through bandages, resin, fractures, and the empty spaces inside bones. When researchers scanned the walls of Tutankhamun's tomb, the machine didn't just reveal anomalies, it revealed possibility. Subtle shifts in density suggested where chisels once moved. Variations in plaster texture hinted at hidden seams. In the stillness of a computer screen, the past trembled softly into view. Yet no doorway has opened, at least not yet. That anticipation has become its own kind of heartbeat in the archaeological world. Every scan adds a layer of clarity, but also a layer of doubt. What if the patterns are natural? What if the radar misread moisture or mineral veins? The desert plays tricks, and stone can echo like an illusion. But still, the research continues. And deeper still is the science of DNA, cold, quiet, powerful. With careful extraction, scientists have reconstructed the family tree of the 18th dynasty. They found the younger lady, mother of Tutankhamun. They found Akhenaten. They found siblings intertwined by custom and royal expectation. But Nefertiti herself remains outside the genetic spotlight, like a missing note in a half-forgotten song. If her DNA is waiting somewhere, it must still be sealed in a chamber undisturbed by air, moisture, or time. And so the mystery shifts from who were these mummies to where is the queen we cannot test. Radar sweeps continue in the valley with more precision than ever before. Some surveys show promising voids, others contradict them. Each result is like a lantern flickering in a long hallway, bright for a moment, fading the next. And the deeper question emerges, why is it so difficult to find her? Ancient Egyptian burials followed strict conventions. Pharaohs were interred in grand tombs aligned to cosmological principles. Queens, especially powerful ones, had their own resting places. But the Amarna period broke rules. It defied tradition. It challenged gods older than pyramids. Perhaps Nefertiti's burial followed a pattern we no longer understand, or perhaps those who succeeded her wanted her memory buried, not preserved. A hidden tomb can be an act of reverence, or an act of erasure. And then there is the matter of inscriptions still undeciphered, marks too faint, too damaged, or too symbolic for modern scholars to agree upon. Some hint at a female pharaoh. Some suggest a shifting of power. Others contradict entirely. These fragments form a mosaic that shimmers but never solidifies. For those who study her, there is a strange comfort in this uncertainty. They describe it as standing on the edge of a great discovery, like feeling the breath of a secret just before it speaks. Because if Nefertiti's tomb is ever found, if her sarcophagus emerges from the dark, if her name appears in untouched hieroglyphics, it would overturn decades of theories in an instant. It would rewrite royal lineage, reshape beliefs about Amarna, and challenge everything we thought we knew about Egypt's most enigmatic queen. But until that moment arrives, the search itself becomes the story, one made of quiet footsteps in long corridors, soft beeps of scanning machines, the rustle of ancient bandages under laboratory lights, and the gentle persistence of humans trying to hear a voice that has been silent for 3,000 years. And somewhere beneath these layers of science and silence, the Queen waits, not lost, not forgotten, but simply unseen, like a constellation hidden just behind the horizon, waiting for the right night to rise.
In archaeology, there is a moment that researchers often describe but rarely experience. A moment so fragile, so powerful, that it feels less like discovering history and more like history choosing to reveal itself. As the search for Nefertiti deepens, this feeling becomes almost palpable, hovering over every radar sweep, every CT scan, every excavation proposal waiting for approval. For the Queen, who once stepped into the sunlight as if she were carved from the radiance of Aten itself, her silence now feels intentional, like a final act of control over a narrative others tried to erase. And the world continues to search for her, not out of desperation, but out of longing. A longing to understand the last missing chapter of a story that reshaped Egypt, and perhaps a longing to connect with a woman whose presence still vibrates through the sands of time. The more scientists examine the clues, the stranger and more delicate the mystery becomes. Consider the fissures on the northern wall of Tutankhamun's tomb. They may be structural, or they may be traces of a sealed doorway. Consider the radar detections. Some show hollows, others do not. Consider the inscriptions scattered across Amarna and Thebes, hints of a female ruler, mentions of Neferuaten, phrases dissolving into dust or overwritten by later kings who wanted the Amarna period forgotten. The lines between evidence and illusion are thin, shimmering like heat waves rising from desert stone. And yet the heart of the mystery may lie not in what we have found, but in what remains missing. Nefertiti's burial goods have never been discovered. No funerary mask, no sarcophagus fragments, no canopic jars with her cartouche, no inscriptions that definitively mark her passing. For a queen of her status, this absence is enormous, so enormous that it becomes meaningful. It suggests intention. Someone hid her, or someone erased her, or perhaps she erased herself in a transformation we still cannot decode. And as researchers widen their search beyond KV62, they consider other possibilities. Valleys not yet excavated, cliffs that may conceal shafts, tombs misidentified long ago, or even chambers directly beneath old foundations where no one has looked because the ground itself is considered sacred. Modern tools help, but even they have limits. Radar cannot pierce every kind of rock. DNA cannot resurrect identities without context. Imaging cannot capture what time has shattered. And so, archaeology becomes not just a science, but a meditation, an act of listening. Listening to the faint breaths of history. Listening to the quiet between discoveries. Listening to the possibility that Nefertiti's tomb remains hidden, not because it is inaccessible, but because it demands patience. A patience that mirrors the way she once moved through the corridors of Amarna, calm, deliberate, enigmatic. And perhaps this slow unfolding is fitting, because if her tomb were found suddenly, without the long buildup of anticipation, it would be remarkable, but not transformative. The transformation lies in the journey, the steady hum of radar machines in the night, the soft glow of monitors analyzing ancient stone, the whispered debates among scholars over the slightest pattern or crack. Each step is a brushstroke in a painting still in progress. And as the evidence accumulates, shifting, shimmering, contradicting, clarifying, one truth grows stronger. Finding Nefertiti would be unlike any discovery in modern archaeology. It would rewrite dynastic history. It would challenge long-held assumptions. It would restore a queen whose memory was buried, reshaped, and misinterpreted. It would reveal the final act of a woman who, even in death, held the power to disappear. Tonight, as we drift in the quiet warmth of this story, imagine a sealed chamber somewhere in the desert, a chamber untouched by time, protected by darkness, and waiting. Within it, imagine a queen resting beneath layers of gold, resin, linen, and unspoken history. The air is still, the silence is absolute. And if one day a beam of light were to break that darkness, the world would change in an instant. Because if we ever find Nefertiti, truly find her, it will not merely be a discovery, it will be the archaeological shock of the century.
Power fades, crowns crumble, kingdoms collapse into dust, but legacy, true legacy, lingers quietly, drifting through centuries like a soft echo that refuses to disappear. And if there is one figure from ancient Egypt whose legacy has risen from silence more powerfully than any inscription carved into stone, it is Nefertiti. Tonight, as we enter the final chapter of her story, we are no longer chasing her footsteps through dark tombs or decoding broken reliefs. Instead, we are looking at the world she shaped, not through force, not through conquest, but through identity, artistry, and the enduring resilience of a woman who lived in a world designed to forget her. In the modern study of Egyptian history, Nefertiti has become a central figure in conversations about female power, an unexpected beacon from a time when women were rarely allowed to rule outright. Scholars have turned to her not merely as a queen, but as a rare symbol of what a woman could achieve in a world balanced on strict hierarchies. Her image, once erased from walls and cartouches, is now studied in lectures on gender, authority, and the politics of representation. Students examine how she stood beside Akhenaten not as an ornament, but as a partner, equal in pose, equal in gesture, equal in spiritual authority. And in that equality, modern historians find something revolutionary. Because in her lifetime, she defied boundaries. In her disappearance, she escaped erasure. And in her rediscovery, she became something larger than a queen. She became a symbol. But the legacy of Nefertiti expands beyond gender studies. It flows through the art of the Amarna period, a style so unique that nothing before or after ever resembled it. Long necks, softened faces, intimate family scenes. This was an era where royal life was portrayed not with rigid idealism, but with warmth, connection, even vulnerability. It was art that breathed, art that dared to show a pharaoh kissing his daughters or sitting close to his queen beneath rays of the Aten. And at the center of that artistic revolution was Nefertiti, the muse, the model, the radiant icon. Her features shaped an entire school of sculpture. Her pose defined elegance for generations of artisans.
Even today, museums across the world display Amarna pieces as if they were windows into a softer human side of ancient royalty. And in almost every statue, relief, or fragment, you can sense her presence. Not loud, not commanding, but serene, luminous, like a quiet star guiding the hands of artists across centuries. Beyond academia and museums, her legacy pulses through modern culture in ways she never could have imagined. Tourism in Egypt often begins with the pyramids, but many visitors arrive searching for something more elusive: the woman behind the limestone bust, the queen whose name sings like a verse. Nefertiti. Designers borrow her silhouette, authors borrow her mystique, movements borrow her strength. She appears in films, poems, perfumes, and artworks, sometimes imperfectly portrayed, sometimes misunderstood, but always magnetic. And perhaps that is the essence of her legacy. She invites interpretation. She invites reflection. She invites us to look at power not as something shouted, but as something lived, quietly, intentionally, gracefully. And as we move deeper into this chapter, as the night grows softer and the story draws us in, one truth becomes clear. Nefertiti's legacy did not survive because someone preserved it. It survived because it refused to die. Like light shining through a hidden doorway, it seeped through fractures in history until it reached us. A queen erased, who became immortal.
Across museums, classrooms, documentaries, and quiet living rooms where late-night viewers fall asleep to ancient stories, Nefertiti's legacy continues to expand in ways she could never have imagined. What was once a fragmented mystery has become a global fascination, and what was once a queen erased from the record has become a guiding figure for how we understand identity, beauty, power, and resilience. One of the most striking reflections of her lasting influence is the revival of the Amarna aesthetic in modern culture. Artists around the world study the elongated lines, the tender family scenes, the daring departure from traditional Egyptian formality. They find in the Amarna style a vulnerability, a willingness to show royalty as human, flawed, affectionate. And within these curves and contours, Nefertiti's presence lingers like a signature. Countless exhibits are built around her era, drawing crowds who want to peer into the most intimate chapter of Egyptian creativity. Visitors stand before delicate shards of pottery, broken statues, and faded wall fragments, not for what they show, but for what they suggest, a moment in time when art dared to feel. In this soft revolution of sculpture and relief, Nefertiti remains the central motif, the face that artists return to again and again. And it is through this artistic revival that modern culture recognizes her, not simply as a queen, but as a muse who transcended the rigid structures of her world. Yet art is only one part of her modern echo. In discussions about feminism and historical agency, Nefertiti has become an anchor, a figure used to remind people that female sovereignty is not a modern invention. Her story invites debate. Was she a co-ruler, a pharaoh, a strategist orchestrating spiritual and political transitions behind the scenes? Did she wield power openly or subtly, with the grace of someone who understood the cost of visibility? These questions, unresolved yet compelling, become lessons in how history remembers women. Even in documentaries and academic symposia, scholars point to Nefertiti as an example of how female power can be concealed, erased, or deliberately reframed. And through that reframing, she becomes a symbol, not of certainty, but of possibility, a reminder that women in history have always shaped the world, even when the world chose not to record it. Tourism, too, has become a vessel for her legacy. Travelers arrive in Egypt, searching not only for pyramids or temples, but for traces of her presence. The breeze that moves across the ruins of Amarna, the silent hallways of the Noise Museum in Berlin, where her bust stands illuminated like a lunar deity. The stories whispered by guides who speak her name with reverence. People who know nothing about dynasties or archaeology often know her face, and that alone speaks to the power of her legacy. Nefertiti exists in collective memory, not as a figure reconstructed from dusty papyri, but as an emotional presence, a symbol of elegance shaped by centuries of fascination. But perhaps the greatest measure of her enduring influence lies in how she makes people feel. Nefertiti invites introspection. She makes us question how stories survive. She makes us wonder why some names live on while others fade. She encourages conversations about identity, beauty, intentionality, and the strange, delicate balance between presence and absence. She reminds us that history is not a fixed narrative. It is a living dialogue between the past and the present. And in that dialogue, she speaks softly but clearly. Her disappearance becomes a meditation on ephemerality. Her rediscovery becomes a meditation on resilience. Her image becomes a meditation on how humanity chooses its icons. And so, as we move deeper into this chapter, drifting through the quiet glow of her legacy, it becomes clear that Nefertiti's impact is not defined by her tomb, her reign, or even her disappearance. It is defined by the way she continues to shape minds, inspire artists, embolden women, and draw the world into a story that, despite missing pieces, feels whole in its mystery. A story where silence is not emptiness, but presence. A story where the unseen is just as powerful as the known. A story where a queen without a tomb becomes a queen without an ending.
As our journey through Nefertiti's world reaches its final moments, we find ourselves in a strange space between past and present. A place where ancient footsteps echo softly into our modern lives, where a queen who once walked through sunlit courts now moves quietly through museums, stories, and dreams. Her legacy, unlike her physical presence, has never vanished. Instead, it has stretched across time like a golden thread, weaving itself into conversations about power, beauty, identity, and the quiet resilience that belongs uniquely to those history tried to erase. In many ways, what resonates most deeply about Nefertiti is not what we know, but what we do not. Her missing tomb, her sudden disappearance, her possible rule as Pharaoh, her erased cartouches, her hidden lineage, the absence of answers has become its own kind of presence. And paradoxically, it is precisely this incomplete portrait that allows her to endure so powerfully today. In a world obsessed with certainty, Nefertiti remains a reminder that mystery, too, has value. That some figures endure not because their stories are complete, but because their silence leaves room for each generation to discover something of themselves within her. Scholars see a political strategist in her. Artists see a muse. Feminists see a pioneer. Travelers see a timeless icon. Dreamers see a woman who stepped out of the light and into legend. And each of these interpretations becomes a reflection, not of Nefertiti alone, but of the people looking back at her. This is perhaps her most remarkable legacy. She adapts, she evolves, she exists simultaneously in the cracks of history and in the imaginations of those who seek her. And in that duality, she becomes not just a queen of Egypt, but a queen of human curiosity itself. Even the landscape she shaped continues to breathe her influence. The ruins of Amarna, though worn by wind and time, still carry the echoes of an era unlike any other. The sunlight that touches its broken temples feels different, soft, almost reverent, as if aware that this was once the seat of a revolution that dared to shift the very axis of belief. Nefertiti was not merely a figure within that revolution, she was one of its architects. Her hands shaped art, her presence shaped the Aten cult, and her partnership with Akhenaten redefined what royal power could look like, shared, mirrored, intertwined. In modern times, as people walk through the remnants of her city or stand before her iconic bust in Berlin, they participate in the continuation of her legacy. They become the final link in a long chain, stretching from ancient Amarna to the present moment, carrying her story forward simply by remembering her. And in the quiet of night, when these stories settle into the soft space between thought and sleep, her presence becomes even more intimate. She becomes not a queen carved in stone, but a woman who lived, ruled, loved, dreamed, fought, disappeared, and yet, against all odds, endured. Nefertiti teaches us that legacy is not measured in monuments or tombs or hieroglyphs. It is measured in the emotions a life continues to stir. It is measured in the questions a story continues to inspire. It is measured in the way a name continues to glow, even when history tries to extinguish it. Tonight, as we let her story drift into the gentle hush of sleep, imagine her legacy not as something finished, but as something still unfolding. Imagine the sands of Amarna whispering her name to the wind. Imagine the desert stars reflecting the same light that once shone on her throne. Imagine her presence lingering quietly in the world, not as a solved mystery, but as an eternal invitation to reflect. Reflect on power, reflect on silence, reflect on identity, reflect on the beauty of what endures. Reflect.
In the quiet that follows Nefertiti's story, a softer kind of silence begins to settle. It is the kind of silence that feels almost alive, like the warm breath of a desert night drifting through broken colonnades and forgotten rooms. If you listen closely, you can almost imagine the last traces of her footsteps brushing lightly across the sand, fading not into disappearance, but into a gentler kind of presence, one that lingers without needing to be seen. The world she once shaped now lies in fragments across time, yet those fragments glow faintly, as if holding on to a memory that refuses to die. The light of Aten has long since dimmed, but a softer radiance remains, rising not from a sun carved into stone, but from the quiet understanding that some lives continue long after the last torch has gone out. Imagine for a moment the empty halls of Amarna under moonlight. The stones, cool and pale, reflect the faint shimmer of the stars. A breeze slips through the remains of doorways, carrying with it a whisper, not loud, not urgent, but patient. A whisper that feels less like a message and more like a presence. You don't need to know the words to understand it. You simply feel it. Nefertiti's name, softened by time, drifts somewhere in that whisper. She is not asking to be found. She is not asking to be solved. She is simply still here. In the questions that remain, in the beauty that endured, in the gentle hush that settles when the world closes its eyes. Tonight, as sleep begins to gather around you, let her story become a soft lantern in the distance, glowing not to guide your steps, but to ease your breath. Let the desert wind smooth the edges of your thoughts. Let the stars over Amarna rest above your mind like a quiet crown. And as the last light fades, let the silence become comforting, steady, deep. The kind of silence where legends rest, the kind where dreams begin.